Can an anxious and avoidant partner get together, and would that ever work? So in the way that I tend to approach this, can it work, is I like to look at it through, there's a couple different frameworks that I have for this. I think for today's video, I'll talk about the A.C.E.S framework. So the A.C.E.S framework is awareness, control, emotional freedom, and spiritual transcendence. So awareness is just looking at, I've noticed there are patterns in my life that have been repeating for whatever reason, and I'm not liking that repetition, and I want to do something to change it. And also awareness touches upon the motivation we have to gather more awareness, to gain insight, to become aware of the patterns so that we might change them down the line. So now that leads us to control. Awareness allows us to take control of the things that we can't, and also to be increasingly aware of the things that we can control and the things that we cannot control, right? And once we have clearly defined the lines around those things, already a lot of our insecurity will be alleviated, because anxiety and insecurity usually stems from a lot of vagueness and a lot of unknowns and a lot of an inability to sift and sort through the subtleties of the energy moving through your body. Because emotions, anxiety, it's a quality of energy moving through your body. And if we haven't had, let's say, what they call the good enough environment or the good enough upbringing, then we haven't had a lot of mirrored experiences or experiences of love and reciprocation and attunement that taught us how to sift and sort through the energy moving through our body, meaning taught us how to understand our emotions and what they feel like and what they look like and what they might be stimulated by and what control and responsibility I have to process those things and negotiate them in my inner life and in my environment, right? What choice do I have to mitigate the effect of that in my inner life and my environment? So if we haven't had those experiences, then we haven't really developed a sense of control around them, which means that's what stepping into emotional freedom is all about. So when we step into emotional freedom, we are leaning into the experience of the energy moving through our bodies. We are creating an emotional vocabulary. And for those of you in my Attachment 101 courses, this is like the first or second lesson, is we start playing with, what is my emotional vocabulary? And how do I even sift and sort through that? Well, we discover our emotional vocabulary by going back and learning it the way that we should have learned it initially, which is the way that children learn it, which is through creativity and play, which is through exploration, which is through unbridled curiosity, which is through gentle challenges and limits being created so that we can explore just enough to expand our ideas, but not so far that we are overexposed, helpless, and vulnerable, right? Vulnerable in the sense that to a negative consequence. So it isn't that we are letting the child play willy-nilly on the playground and no one is watching. We are allowing our inner child to play on the playground, and then we're standing underneath the jungle gym, kind of like bracing for when they might fall so that we can just nudge them back up and be like, try again. Right? So this is the work that we are now doing in the inner space. So emotional freedom is about creating lines around those experiences, building that emotional vocabulary, which is going to come from creativity and play, metaphor, symbol. That's also parts work. For those of you that are familiar with it, inner child work and parts work. So this is where we start to gain emotional freedom, because what's the opposite of that? Well, the opposite of that is vagueness, confusion, big feelings that we label as anxiety and overwhelm and stress. Meanwhile, there's like 1,000 different subtler experiences going on in that under the umbrella of those words. And unless we go through this process of sorting through our emotional and energetic vocabulary, we're always going to feel overwhelmed by it. Now, the other side of that is this sense of oh, I'm feeling a conflict. And what is a conflict? A conflict is two warring voices inside of me. And if I have two warring voices inside of me, that means there are two parts of me in operation. And each one represents a need that I have that appear to be in conflict, but most likely is pointing towards the same kind of resource that I'm needing to tap into right now. So for example, I think we should do this. Oh, but we should do that instead. And what's the anxiety we feel is that usually there's a need not being met in whichever direction we think we're going to take. So first we want to tap into what is the need, and it's not being met usually because we have a underlying false premise about how it needs to be met, and then an idea how it never can be. So for example, well, I feel lonely and the solution to my loneliness must be to find a partner. And then another part says, oh, but I'm afraid to find a partner because we got rejected before and I don't want to be rejected again, but I really want a partner and I don't want to be alone, but I don't want to be rejected, but I don't want to be alone, but I don't want to be rejected, but I don't want to be alone. But the only way we can fix this is if we find a partner. And so because we assume the only way to fix this is that we need to find a partner, that argument is never going to end, because we're both assuming it has to be fixed in the same way. So one's always going to be asking for that specific attachment thing, and the other one's always going to be pushing against it. So when we tap into soul-centered security, we realize that's not the only solution. There's any number of solutions, because love is ubiquitous and you are love. And so you find love wherever you go because you take yourself wherever you go. And so when you connect to the essence of that, and it doesn't mean, and connecting to your own essence doesn't mean you go sit in an ashram at the top of a mountain by yourself. We can sense the transcendent and we can connect to the larger spiritual essence by being in relationship to community. I think that that's the biggest thing that we need to start doing, is going back to community, and going back to community in a way that connects us to nature, connects us to something larger and transcendent. And this is beyond and above organized religion, especially for women. And that tends to be the audience that I work with the most, but it's also true for other gender expressions. Creating circles where you connect to others, you create an energy field. And when you can tap into that energy field, the narrow focus we have on partnership and intimacy as being the only channel through which we're able to take in that kind of love. Love is energy. Love is a massive flow of energy that we are requesting. And so when you create a broader sense of community and an energy grid, you can tap into that and your channel opens wider. And so you start to feel that love in a more profound way. And it exists above and beyond romance and partnership. But it also is a part of the romance and partnership. It informs it. And in many ways, it attracts it, right? So that's awareness, control, and emotional freedom, and moving into the spiritual transcendence, right? And so this is when we are realizing that our relationships are just microcosms of a larger sort of spiritual curriculum that we are here to learn in our lifetime. And oftentimes, most people who come to my world and who meet with me, they know on some level that their work, let's say, their curriculum has to do with relationship. And so usually what they wind up doing that brings them a sense of purpose will connect to their journey with relationship in some way. So that's the A.C.E.S framework. And so bringing this back to the original question, can it work between an anxious and avoidant partner? If we are able to become aware of our patterns and triggers, if we can start to define more clearly what is within our control and what is not within our control, so that we might experience more emotional freedom, both in and outside of relationship, and tap into something transcendent and meaningful and purposeful on our own and in relationship to community, then yes, it can work. So long as you realize that this whole process is not about making yourself the ideal partner so that you can attract the ideal partner. It's about removing the goop that conditioning and trauma and developmental injuries may have layered on top of our identities, so that we can become more aware of what are the foundational building blocks of this curriculum and how might I understand them through the principles and the values and the priorities that I hold, and do those fundamentally work with this person. Has really nothing to do with love, because those things, when you have the same things, love can evolve from it, and love can also exist whether you don't have any of those things, right? What we're really looking for is that sweet combination where you have those things and you have love, right? But we can love someone who doesn't have any of those things. And that love is in many ways a kind of unconditional love, because none of the conditions are right and yet you love them, and that's okay. So this is where we're stepping into the spiritual transcendent part. Once we can understand this from a larger spiritual perspective, now we get to let that go on the physical plane and know that we're always going to be connected to them no matter what. But it's not related to your curriculum in this earth, except to show you what needed to be dealt with in order to call in the next part of your lesson learning, right? So I know I went a little lofty in that explanation, but I hope that that's hopeful for that particular question. Also, remember to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week and I wouldn't want you to miss out.